In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the frog for pattern M6667 from McCall's. So these are the mitten patterns. For this pattern, you're going to need piece number 12, 14, 19, 13, and 17. You're going to need black and white fabric for the eyes, green and red fabric for the tongue and the body. I'm using fleece for this one. For the main part of the frog, you can just do the top green, or you can do the bottom and then the piece number 14 green as well, or you can take piece 14 separately and do it red. I am going to do it green, so the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to tape it together just so I don't have to worry about sewing it later. And then I can just trace around the whole thing without worrying about losing time there. So make sure when you tape it together, you overlap just a little bit so that you get rid of your seam allowance. So on the back you can see it's overlapping. When you start with your fabric, make sure that you fold it so your good sides are touching. So my good side is up, so I'm going to fold it in half. Now I'm not folding the whole piece in half because I know I won't need the whole thing, so I'm only going to fold it enough that it will fit my pieces that I need. So depending on how your pieces are cut, you may have to maneuver and rearrange your fabric a little bit more than if they were cut a different way. But make sure that it's flat and that you're not on top of any other fabric. We're trying to use as little fabric as possible as well. Okay, now that I have them all laid out, I'm going to take my pins and starting in one of the corners, I'm going to go straight down to the table, sideways, and come back up, pinning all the way around all of my pieces. If you're going to do piece number 14 red, this is how you would pin it. So you'd lay out your piece number 12, 13, and 19 without piece number 14 attached to it. Remember, when you're pinning, go straight down to the table and then come right back up through all 3 layers. For the tongue and piece number 14, you're going to fold your fabric just enough that it fits piece number 14 so that we're not wasting any fabric if we can possibly not waste any. Piece number 14, and then put piece number 17 right beside it so that's taking up the same amount of space. That way someone else can use this corner for their project. Remember to go to the table, sideways, and come right back up, starting on the edge, so that if you have to move the ones in the middle, you can. Now that you're done tracing, you're going to transfer all your markings. So we did extra small size, so every time you see XS in a dot, you're going to put a dot, or if you see dots or dotted lines, you're going to transfer them. For the eyes, we're just going to put an X so that we know their placements, and we're not going to transfer this line, just the dotted lines. So to transfer our dots, we're going to take out our pin surrounding it, put our pin through the dot, and make a mark. Then do the same thing on this line, this dot, sorry. We do need to mark our placement lines. This is for our elastic, so we're going to do the extra small one. So pulling out your pin. Now that you've transferred all your lines, you're going to take your shears, you're going to cut around every single piece, making sure you keep your shears flat on the table. Use the whole shear. Your next step is to transfer all your markings to the other side. So there's two ways you can do this. One way is you take a pin and you stick it through the spot, flip over your pattern or your fabric, and you draw the dot on the other side. And you do that for every single dot or line that we transferred. For the eyes, for the big part I'm going to use a white, and for the inside I'm going to use some of my scrap green. So making sure that you fold your good sides touching. You can use a tracer, or if you don't have a tracer you can take something that's the same size. So this spool of thread is the same size as my eye. Remember, you have 2 on each frog face, so you need 4. So line up your fabrics, especially if it's scrap fabric, to make sure that it all stays lined up. Put a pin to hold it if you feel like it should. Trace around. There's one. And there's my second one. Now for his inside, my scissor circle is approximately the size, so I'm going to trace that circle. I'm going to put some pins inside to hold the eyes together, making sure that when I cut, I don't cut my pin. So I might have to move it around as I go. So pull your pin away from the black line and start cutting. You have to pull it out for that last little piece, that's okay. So there's one eye. Now we're going to sew our eyepieces together. So making sure that you open it up so your good sides are up, so you shouldn't see any marker or chalk if you decide to use chalk. Lay your green pieces down. Take your needle, make sure you have a knot on the far side. I'm going to start at the back and come through close to the edge of the green. Go sideways just like you're pinning and through the circle. I'm going to do that all the way around, making your stitches as small and as close together as you can. You're now going to take piece number 19, and where we do our X's, we're going to stick our pins through, and that is where we're going to line up our eyes. So put your pins in like this, flip it over, take your eye, and thread it through the middle. Now you can position your eyes however you want them when they're where you want them. Take the pin out from the bottom and pin it on the good side. So for this step, your good sides are both up, so the bad side of your eye is touching the good side of the body. Making sure that the thumb piece is out to the side. Same on the other one. You're now going to sew them on with your sewing machine. Your machine settings to sew on the eyes are A3, your stitch width is 3, and your stitch length is 3. You're going to be sewing using your presser foot as a guide. So you're going to line up your eye so that the middle of your presser foot is going halfway on the white and half on the green. So inside that hole where your needle goes in, you should see green and white. Going to go forward 3 stitches, reverse stitch 3 stitches, and then using your hand wheel, sewing all the way around, slowly turning wherever you need to keep that needle going on and off the green. Next, you're going to sew your tongue to the red piece. So opening up your piece number 14 so that your good sides are up. Take your tongue, split it open so that the good sides are up as well. Remember, this will be hanging down, so if you'd like to flip it over so that when the tongue hangs, you can see the good side, you can do that as well. So flipping it over, you're going to find your 2 dots that you made on the other side, poke it through, and poke it through the tongue in the exact same spot. And you can flip your pin over to hold it in place. Do the same on the other one. So find your dot, poke your pin through, and poke the pin through the dot of the tongue as well. Once they're flat, pull out your pin and place your pin into the tongue. You're going to then take piece number 12 with the good sides down, so good sides touching each other. You're going to be sewing these pieces together. So once you have them lined up in the middle, put a pin inside. Once that pin is there, you can remove the one holding the tongue. Go to your corner, put a pin in your corner. Do the same in this corner. Don't worry if the green one bunches up. It's the red one that you have to worry about because you need it to be flat. So you may need to put a couple of pins in. So again, line it up in the middle. Pull out that pin. Line up your edges. And now you're going to go to your machine and sew those together. So your settings for this step are A1, stitch width is 0, and stitch length is 3. For this step, you are following the 3/8 line. So line it up so that your pins are facing up. Put your presser foot down. Going to go forward 3 stitches, backwards 3 stitches, and continue to that first pin. When you get to the first pin, pull it out, go to the next pin, pull it out, So now that you open it, you should see that the edges line up. If they don't, like this one, you need to seam rip it and resew it. And you can tell that it didn't work because I have a pucker right here, which means there's a fold and a hole in my fabric. Now that they're sewn together, you're going to sew along your placement lines. So lining up your tongue down the middle, going to stick a pin at the top, and now you're going to sew right along those lines. If you feel like you want to look at the front so that you know you're catching your tongue, just slip your pin to the other side. I'll show you how to do it both ways. Now you're going to take the good sides of your front and back, lay them together so your good sides are touching. You're going to pin all the way around. When you're sewing though, you're going to leave a lot of space open, so the pins are to keep it stable, which is why we're going to put quite a lot in, even though we're not sewing all the way around him. You're now going to sew from the bottom corner up and around to that first dot right before the scoop. You're going to do that on both of them. So if it helps you to put a pin where that dot is, I recommend you do that. Or start from the dot and sew around to the other side. You're going to be sewing on the 5/8 line this time. So cut off all those loose threads that are left from your machine and take those 2 pins out. You're going to open your mitten up so it lies flat, and you're going to take your thumb piece, piece number 13, take your good side, and right where this dot is, you're going to put a pin and take that pin and put it right through the middle of your seam. You're then going to line up those lines to match your mitten. So the tip of the line should end with the point of the side of your mitten. So it should be like that when you're finished. Do the same to the other side. Now when you're sewing on your machine, you're going to follow either your mitten or this black line, whatever is easier for you to follow. Make sure if you follow the black line that you have caught your whole mitten inside of it, because if you miss pieces you are going to get holes and you don't want that. So if you are going to follow that black line, I recommend you put a few more pins in to hold it in line with that line. Now you're going to go sew it on the 5/8 line. So taking your mitten, lining it up. So if you're following this side, you're following the edge of that line with the side of your presser foot. Needle in, pull out your pin, forward a couple stitches, backwards a few stitches. Now as you're going, because you have this big piece underneath, you need to be very careful that you don't catch it. So I'm actually going to sew to this pin, and then I'm going to stop and reposition my fabric. So I'm lifting my presser foot and pushing the big part of my fabric to the other side. Now that you're done sewing your thumb on, when you open it up, you should see that there's no puckers happening along the seams here, that it's a nice straight seam. And if you were to put your hand inside, you should see that the thumb comes out to the side and there's no puckers or pulls in the middle here. So one thing we're going to do to help our hands to move inside is cut notches. So on the circles that go out, you're going to fold your fabric in half, take your shears, and cutting away from your seams on a diagonal line to make a triangle. So that's what notching is. So you're going to do that all the way around on any part that goes out. Once you finish going all the way around, you're going to cut them in half, but not so far that you lose the triangle. So make sure as you're cutting it, you're keeping that nice V that is in the fabric there. When you get to this part where your thumb has been sewn on, you're going to have a lot of extra fabric here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by cutting in towards our seam on the big part of the thumb. That'll stop any puckers from happening. And then you're going to cut the seam to match the smaller one beside it. Then you're going to do the same to the other side. So starting on the circle part, folding in half, cut away, from the thumb, cut right down the middle, right to your seam, just not cutting the seam, and then cut it to match the one inside. Now you're going to pull out the thumb, keeping your good sides touching still. And where we've got our dip or our V, we're going to fold it in half. And you're going to pin all the way from that point down and around to the bottom of your mittens. One important part that needs to match up are the seams right here. Otherwise it will look funny when you flip them through and you may end up with some puckers. So you're going to sew on the 5/8 line, depending on how you've pinned it, starting either on the thumb or at the base. I'll show you both ways. So starting on the 5/8 line, needle in, forward a couple stitches, backwards. When you get to that first pin, put your needle in, pull it out. When you get to that seam, if you need to, use your hand wheel to get over it, that's fine. Now when you're going around, you want to go right to that point. So keep turning and then back stitch. Now if you're starting at the thumb, start right where that point is. Needle in, forward, back stitch, right off the edge if you need to. Carefully turning around that corner. Again, if you want to hand wheel over this, that's fine. Sometimes it makes it a little bit easier. You're going to cut off all your threads. And you're going to do the notches on the thumb just like you did around the face. Now you're ready to hem it, so make sure that your bottoms are even. If they aren't, if they're off a little bit, take your shears and cut them so that they're even and as straight as you can. If you need to use a ruler to draw a line to do that, go ahead. Now you're going to have to add your elastic in. So go grab some elastic from over beside the sink on the roll. You're going to measure it to be the size of your wrist and then add an inch. So I'll show you how to do that. For your elastic, you need a piece of elastic, a square or a ruler that has inches on it, and a pair of shears. You're going to take your elastic and you're going to measure it to be the length of your wrist. Once you have that exact length, you're then going to go to your ruler and add 1 inch, which for our class is this square, You're going to take one pin, put a pin on the 1 inch mark, and then a pin on the end. And you're going to cut it off. Then you're going to take your elastic and you're going to fold it so that this end goes to that first pin that we put in. Take that pin out and put the pin in sideways. You can now remove this pin, and we're going to go to our sewing machine and we're going to sew a square. You're going to do this for both of them, so you're going to have a nice circle in the end. So you're going to stretch your elastic, try not to pull out your pin, over top, just like you did your mitten. Place your presser foot on it. You're going to change your stitch to a zigzag stitch for this. So your stitch will be A3. Your stitch length and stitch width will be both at 3. Going to put your needle in with your hand wheel. Go forward 3 times, then you can remove your pin. So forward and backwards. Two or 3 times. Now we're going to sew them into our mittens. So before you start pinning your elastic to your mitten, you need to separate it into 4 pieces. So the first piece is where your 2 pieces came together that we just sewed. So you're going to put 1 pin there, pull it in half, and then on the other side, put another pin, going from top to bottom, so nice and straight. Now pull your elastic to have your pins matching. And where the fold happens, we're going to put another pin. So when you're done, you should have 4 pins that look like that. Now you have to do the same kind of idea that we just did with his spin. So you're going to make sure that this seam is nice and open all the way around. And you're going to take your elastic and very carefully place it over the tail. And starting at the top, which is where his fin is, you're going to put your pin, pull it out of your elastic, put it down through the fish fabric. Now you're going to go to the other side and right in the middle of the back, so try and find the middle, going to have to stretch, so you might need to use a partner to help you with this. Stretch your glove out. You're going to have to play with the elastic a little bit to get it to cooperate. And right in the middle, move your pin so it goes through your elastic and your fabric. Now the side pin should go right on the side seam. So try and line it up right with that seam. And the other one should go right on the glove seam, where the thumb is. So you're going to do the same thing to the other one. So very carefully, throwing it over. Starting at the top. Moving to the other side. You're now going to go to your machine and sew all the way around with a zigzag stitch. So threading your glove over top of the arm. Be careful that your elastic comes with it as well. You don't want it to get caught. Once you're there, put your presser foot down, put your needle in with your hand wheel, so forward 3 stitches, reverse stitch. You have to be very careful here because that seam is very tight because it's so thick. Pull out your pin, use your hand wheel to go forward until you get off of the seam. Make sure to adjust your elastic as you need to so it goes right down the middle. You're going to have to be pulling at the top as well as potentially pulling down at the bottom because the elastic makes it very tight. Pull it off, clip your threads, and do the same to the other one. So to place our elastic on, we're going to use a zigzag stitch or an elastic stitch. So an elastic stitch is on an A2, and then we'll follow the settings that are in our stitch width and stitch length windows. Otherwise you can do a zigzag stitch on A3. That works as well. So I'm going to start at my seam, put one pin in, and I'm going to put my elastic all the way around my mitten and put my pin again on the other side so that the ends are touching. Now that I've done that, I'm going to hold my elastic and pull it so that I can get the middle. And I'm going to put a pin in that spot as well. So when you're pinning, you're following the lines that you drew. If they're uneven, like mine were, I just drew a line to the higher one so I'd have a little more wrist space. I also made sure that when I put my hand inside, that line was going to be on my wrist, not down my arm. You can also sew your elastic in a circle to start if you'd like, and then put it on like this. That works as well. And now you're going to sew around the elastic just like you did the base of the mitt. So I've set my machine to the elastic stitch, which is A2, and my stitch length is on a 2, and my stitch width, which is the top one here, is on a 6, following the red. So I'm going to thread my mitten and my elastic over my sewing machine arm. Place my presser foot down, and again we're going to be going forward and then back stitching. With elastic, you may have to pull it towards you in order to help it move. So I'm going to thread my mitten and my elastic over my sewing machine arm. Place my presser foot down. And again, we're going to be going forward and then back stitching. With elastic, you may have to pull it towards you in order to help it move. So using your ruler gauge, you're going to make your seam, or your hem, sorry. Using your ruler gauge, you're going to make your initial first fold a 1/2 inch. Then when you fold it a second time, you'll be using half of that, which will end up being a 1/4 inch. So my first fold, I'm going to measure by lining up the top of my ruler gauge with the top of my fabric, and then positioning it so that the red or blue piece, depending on which one you have, is on the bottom of the fold. Once I've done that, I'm going to take my pin and poke it through. I'm going to do this all the way around, spacing out my pins as much as I see is good for the fabric. The places you really want pins are on your seams because they will mess up and they will go crooked on you. So in order to take off your storage compartment, you're going to put your hand underneath and pull it towards you, making sure that you're holding the bottom part here. If you don't, the top will just open. Place that to the side. You're now going to take your mitten and you're going to wrap it around the arm of your sewing machine and place it under your presser foot. If you did the seam right, the presser foot should fit exactly in the middle, and you're going to sew around with a straight stitch all the way until your ends meet again. You now have a nice clean edge here. You're going to fold that over one more time so that it's exactly the same distance. So taking your seam here and just folding it over, making sure that you put a whole bunch of pins in again. And then you're going to sew around this exactly the same way that you just did one more time.